Drivers, start your engines!
Pick the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network. Welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santorowski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about this past week in racing. Joining me in the studio, Louise Torres and Richard Uden. Fellas, how we doing?
We're good, thank you.
Good.
All right, so couple of big races on the docket. We had Darlington, which is always an exciting race to watch there with the throwbacks, liveries for NASCAR. Formula One was in Portugal. No. Formula One was
Spain.
Formula One was in Spain. Yeah, again,
It was indeed.
I'm sorry, I
Catalonia.
I lost a week somewhere. Yeah, Formula One was in Spain, and again, neither race was really spectacular, but they both had good points to watch. Again, like we talked about last week, Spain doesn't always put on a spectacular show.
No,
and the teams are so well versed with the track because of all the testing there. But again, at the end of the day, it was Lewis Hamilton who didn't necessarily have the fastest car. Max Verstappen seemed to have a lot of that race under control, but it was a fine strategy call from Mercedes that put Lewis to the front. So, Richard, if you want to try to break that down a little bit and explain how all that went down.
Yeah, I mean, the whole sort of race really goes back to Saturday afternoon and qualifying, as is pretty typical around Spain. We've talked about this last week on the show. It's the circuit where all the teams do, apart from this year because of the global situation. But that's where the teams typically do all their preseason testing. So they have that place dialed in like nobody's business. And to go there, it's normally they call it a Noah's Ark grid. The teams are all lined up 2 by 2 because the cars are so well equally matched around there, but not quite so much this year. There was a little bit of separation, a little bit of shaking up in the grid, still a few guys trying to get to grips with the teams and everything. But the real issue was an either unwell or unfit Sergio Perez in some ways. He claimed it was a bit of a strange one, really. There was two schools of thought. One was either a shoulder injury, and another one was saying that he was feeling dizzy. He said he felt dizzy, and the team said he had a shoulder injury. So something a little bit strange going on there. But yeah, so Perez qualified down the order there. He's still in the top 10, but not where he should have been in the top 4 with Verstappen, Hamilton, and Bottas. So start of the race. Verstappen gets ahead of Hamilton into the first corner. It was a good move. Hamilton sort of looked like he tried to turn in on him, but Hamilton's a wise head on, still young shoulders. And he gave Verstappen that bit of room, and he's reasonably professional out there. Verstappen had the lead over Hamilton. Leclerc made a fantastic start. Leclerc's driving brilliantly this year. If you look at some of his performances, I know he hasn't made it on the podium yet, but another stellar qualifying performance. Great start. Managed to pull an Alonso, go around the outside of Bottas in turn 3, which is no mean feat under the best of conditions, but with a heavy car, full of fuel, that takes some doing. So Bottas was a little bit compromised there early in the race. And by the time all the first round of pit stops had sorted themselves out there, Verstappen was ahead of Hamilton and Bottas was in third. But it, as with any race in Barcelona, it was obvious that Hamilton could get within that DRS zone, could get within a 1 second of Verstappen, but Verstappen was never, Hamilton was never going to get past Verstappen. It's just the circuit's just not set up that way. They'd made some changes to turn 10 to try and improve overtaking opportunities, but shock horror, it didn't make any difference whatsoever. There was no overtaking really possible unless you were vastly, faster over the course of a lap. With only really one overtaking place on the track going down into turn one there. So Mercedes, took a gamble, or calculated risk rather than gamble, probably is how they describe it. And this goes back to the comment I was making earlier on the Saturday on Perez's qualifying. Because Perez didn't qualify where the car should be, and arguably where the team need him to be, there was a gap behind Bottas that Hamilton could slot into. And having tyres that were 15, 20 laps younger than Verstappen's allowed Hamilton to push a lot harder, got past his teammate without, Bottas didn't make it easy for him, but he's under no obligation to do so. And, fair play to Lewis, even post-race, he said, Bottas was just doing what he needs to do, he's looking out for himself. He's not going to pull over and wave him through sort of thing. So that was good to see. And, due to the performance difference in the age of the tyres, Hamilton was like a second and a half a lap faster than Verstappen, and he just cruised up to him, and the inevitable happened, and he, made his way past there, going down again into turn one. So, great strategy call by the McLaren team, very similar to, McLaren, good grief, I'm doing it as well now, Frank, Mercedes team, and, very similar to what happened at Hungary in 2019. And again, this scenario and this set of circumstances is exactly why Red Bull dropped Alex Albon and picked up Sergio Perez. Now, I know Perez has only been there 4 races, and I know it's a new team, and with limited testing, it is taking some getting used to. It's not easy, for sure. But you look at some, Carlos Sainz going to Ferrari, he's, not a million miles away off the pace now. Daniel Ricciardo had a great race weekend from McLaren there. So some of the guys that are moving teams are already, up there and thereabouts. And Sergio really needs a good weekend in Monaco in 10 days' time. He needs to go out there, qualify in that top 4, and finish in that top 4, and play that blocking card. Red Bull, Christian Horner, Helmut Marko, those guys, they didn't bring in Perez to win to win the Drivers' Championship. They didn't bring him in to make Verstappen go faster, because Verstappen is as fast enough as it is. They brought Perez in there to play that blocker and to play the spoiler for the Mercedes strategy. Because, yes, as much as it was you could look at it and go, wow, that was an amazing strategy called by the Mercedes team. Was it really?
Or was it more of a failure on Red Bull's part?
Exactly. And it wasn't a failure on Red Bull's part, it was a failure on Perez's part. And I don't want to be critical, because I know it's difficult, but when you're in a sport like this, the buck stops somewhere. And purely, if Perez has done what he was brought into the team to do, Mercedes wouldn't have been able to do what they did. So, they desperately need him to step up. Monaco is the prime example due to the nature of that circuit, and have a solid weekend. No mistakes. He span in qualifying, which was just messy. It was a rookie mistake, to put it bluntly. Getting on he sort of got his left rear tire onto the gravel coming out of turn 12 there, and you just can't make mistakes like that in a Red Bull. You can, not being disrespectful, you can do that in a racing point or a forced injury, I'm going to call it. You can do that in a Sauber. You can do that, in a midfield team, and people go, well, that's a mistake. But in a team like Red Bull, Mercedes, there's nowhere to hide. And, Perez has got to be careful. He cannot make those mistakes, because we all know Red Bull are not afraid to chop and change drivers. And
I wanted to bring that up, because it seems like in their quest to find the perfect complement teammate to Verstappen, they've stumbled a few times here, because Albon wasn't it. Gasly. I like Gasly, but he wasn't just what they were looking for. And now Perez, only 4 races in, we're already showing some. So
yeah, I mean, I've got a theory on Gasly, and you know what? Yes, there was a lot of pressure on him. From the very start. You look back to his first few test sessions. And he made those mistakes and he crashed. With a brand new wing on the car in Barcelona during one of the preseason tests and all this sort of stuff. So there was obviously a lot of pressure, and he probably didn't do as well as was expected in the early part of that season. But I wonder if Verstappen reminds me a lot of Schumacher. He's clinical, and Senna in a way he is clinical. He has this. To his mind, divine right to win in some ways. And he may have seen Gasly as a threat and may have seen Gasly as a guy that, okay, this guy is he's quick. And he may have played the politics game within the team and put Gasly under pressure and put his nose out of joint a little bit and made it difficult for him. Now, I'm not saying that is the case, but it wouldn't surprise me because from what Gasly's shown, being back at Toro Rosso and Alpha Tauri or whatever, he won a race for goodness sake last year, and that wasn't pure luck. He's
a Grand Prix winner, yeah, absolutely.
And he's a podium finisher the year before. He can get a job done, and he's a very, very, very competent driver. I wonder if there isn't a bit of that from Verstappen's point of view. Maybe you made life difficult for him. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hinting at, whether it's something internally within Red Bull or with Verstappen that we're struggling to find that Rubens Barrichello for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
hey, maybe there's another side to it. Maybe Verstappen is just so good that there's nobody going to be as close to. Maybe he is. People say the Hamilton, Schumacher, Sennas of the world could find an extra 2-3 tenths of a second out of nowhere. Maybe Verstappen can find an extra half a second out of nowhere, and guys just can't keep up with it. I don't know. I don't think that is the case. I mean,
obviously the kid is very talented and he's very, very quick. So yeah. I mean, there may be some validity in that the teammates are just having a hard time holding pace with him, or the fact that the car is designed to fit his particular driving style to where he can put it on pole, but the best his teammates can muster up because the car is designed with Max in mind. It's a little harder for them to get the maximum out of the car. I don't know.
I think it's a bit of everything there. As you say, I think there's, if you take the 3 or 4 elements there that we discussed, the fact that Verstappen is just quick, the fact the car works well around him, the fact that Perez is relatively new to the team, the fact that probably the team management and the team structure clearly favours Verstappen. You add all of those things up, and that's where you get your 3, 4, 5 tenths of a second delta. And, Red Bull just can't afford that. And maybe they, I don't know. I really don't know, because Red Bull have never played that game of a solid number 2, like Ferrari have, and like to a certain extent Mercedes. Because Mercedes got bitten when they had that Rosberg-Hamilton rivalry going back, to the sort of 2013-14, then through those 2 or 3 years. So, but Red Bull have always wanted to try and have their drivers pit against each other. You go back to Vettel and Webber, and then Verstappen and Ricciardo. They've always wanted the drivers to push each other, but then they don't always like the consequences. Thinking back to Turkey when Vettel and Webber hit each other, or Baku when Verstappen and Ricciardo hit each other. So it's a bit of 6 of one, half of the dozen of the other. Yeah, you want teammates to fight, but then you also don't want to take, pay the consequences, sort of thing.
It's interesting. It's interesting how that, teammates of equal status works so well in IndyCar, but in Formula One, not so much. You know what I mean? It's like Formula One it's just like ingrained in the culture that there needs to be a pecking order within the team. there's very few occasions where I can think of just teammates that were on absolute equal footing. And even when you're talking Prost and Senna, they both thought the other was getting preferential treatment,
Oh yeah.
So there's always, but I mean, you look at these guys in IndyCar, right? Look at the three guys at Penske, the four guys at Penske all seem to be getting along, race one another, and
it's different though, isn't it? This is the big difference between, to put it bluntly, between US racing and European racing. The concept of teammates is far more prevalent in Europe. They don't, you are a team. In the US, you're individual teams. I remember the first race I was ever at in NASCAR. We were at Richard Childress. We had 3 cars out there, and one of our cars qualified like 7th or 8th, which was pretty good. And I went to one of the guys who worked in another team. Oh, I see, so-and-so had a good qualifying. And they said, I don't give up. They don't, really in NASCAR, especially, there's no concept of teammates. It's just, Yeah,
that's an excellent point. Yeah. When you consider in Formula One, you got these guys share the same pit crew. And you don't
exactly.
Have,
that's the big thing. Yeah.
You don't have that in American racing. So, Louise, what are your thoughts here? You've been kind of quiet there. Want to kind of bring you into the conversation.
Honestly, like you mentioned about Bottas and Hamilton, I think it's kind of blown up a bit out of proportion. It was naturally going to be that way, considering the race wasn't terrible. It was just strategy. As far as Red Bull's concerned, they just got beaten big time on strategy. And as far as Paris is concerned, Monaco has never been historically his strongest track. He's been bitten. He's been injured. This is the vital race for him. If he gets out of Monaco with a great run, it'll do him any wonders. If he doesn't, then that may be the end of the road as far as Red Bull's chances of the Constructors' Championship is concerned. And as far as the teammates ordeal,
you put a lot of pressure on Perez there.
Yeah. He hasn't put on one solid all-around race weekend yet in my book. He just hasn't.
No.
Imola
he's had a good race.
Yes.
Imola, he had a pretty solid race, I think, wasn't it? But it wasn't. But this was one of the things, looking back at Perez before he was picked and before he went there, when he had a good race, it was typically because of bad qualifying. I look back on it, and he won a race last year, and he's got on the podium before, but a lot of the times that's been like tire management. I remember even back at the Sauber days when he first came into Formula One, I think it was Monza. He got, he could make a set of tires last forever, and that's great. But you need the whole package, and maybe he's being shown up a little bit here at Red Bull. I don't know.
Could be that, and also Imola. Yeah, he qualified second, but otherwise he had a terrible sessions and a terrible race. In hindsight, and I still look back, and I'm still standing by it. If Red Bull are not in that mix, Imola was the homage of a bad sign to come.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the situation is, and this is talking completely off the cuff here, but hey, Hulkenberg's still available.
Yes, he is. Yeah, and so is Kubica.
Yeah,
I know, right? So
let's sailed with Kubica.
Yeah, guys, let's shift gears a bit and let's talk about Aston Martin, because there have been some interesting news stories that have come out just very recently, where they've got some quotes, I guess, or alleged quotes from some members of the team there who are evidently unhappy with the direction that Mr. Stroll is taking with the team. And he's got the way I read it is like it's the my way or the highway, where they would have preferred to have I think they prefer to have a low rake car like Red Bull, but they had planned to design, but he said, no, let's do this, copy the Mercedes.
Well, yeah, so you got to look at it in two ways. Undoubtedly, the regulations for 2021 help the high rake cars. So when I talk about rake, that's basically the angle the car sits in, corresponding to the angle of the floor in comparison to the track. So a high rate car, like a Red Bull, for example, has a relatively high rear end, which means the rear wing sits high in the airflow, etc., etc.
Right. So there's more clearance on the back of the car than there is in the front of the high rake.
Yeah, and if you look at
then a low rake car is more level.
Correct. Yeah. So if you were to take a Mercedes, which is typically a low rate car, and the Red Bull, which has been the high rate car, and you put those side by side, you could see the difference quite clearly. So going back 2 or 3 years now to when the Stroll family purchased Aston Martin, Force Injuries became. The new owners, they obviously have a remit. The remit is to make money. That's the only reason that Mr. Stroll is there. Lawrence Stroll, I think. Is it Lawrence? Lawrence Stroll?
Yes.
Lawrence
Stroll, yep. Of course, I like to call him Papa Stroll because it just sounds
Papa
fun.
Stroll, yeah.
Yep.
I get think of Papa Smurf. But,
Exactly, yeah.
But no, so he's got a remit though. It's basically, I don't care what anybody says, it's to make money. He's a businessman. He's a billionaire businessman. Billionaire businessmen do not become billionaire businessmen by giving away money. Okay, they become billionaires by making money. So what he wants to do is make the car as quick as possible, as cheaply as possible. Pretty logical business acumen there. Maximum return, minimum input. So what does he say? He says to his guys, well, hey, look, that Mercedes is really fast. Let's make a Mercedes. Now, from an engineering standpoint, that's blasphemy. In Formula One, you just don't do that. You do not. That is not what you do. You obviously can take design cues and design leads and have staff move around and people move around, and you learn from design principles that other people have, for sure. But you do not, and it's not written in the rules per se, it's just the gentleman's agreement, should we say, within Formula One. You do not do that. You do not go along and just copy somebody else's designs, which is basically what they did. And these days we have such phenomenal technology in terms of scanning technology and imagery technology that it doesn't take a genius to do that. And you hire 2 or 3 of their engineers from Mercedes and you can get pretty close pretty quick. Now that's come back to bite them because they're pinned in this corner with this high rake design.
Right. Now, and their car is not that good.
No. Now, the problem is fundamentally, they don't understand how that car works. Mercedes do. And that's why Mercedes have been able to react and improve the car faster than Aston Martin have, because Mercedes is like, okay, we understand how our car works. So if we have a deficiency in a certain area, we know how to overcome that deficiency. Aston Martin don't, because they don't genuinely understand the core engineering principles that's made the car quick. So there's a lot of engineers now and a lot of people within the Aston Martin organization that are starting to be a little bit, well, hey, look, we're some of the leading design engineers in the motorsport industry, and we're basically being asked to photocopy a car. That's not what they do.
They're becoming a little more vocal. Yeah, there's
exactly. And teams, drivers, engineers talk to engineers at other teams. Every engineer in the Formula One paddock knows an engineer. Other teams, they've worked together, they live near each other because all the teams are based around the similar sort of area. It's just how it works. So, Bob, who works at Racing Point, talks to Fred, who works at, Red Bull, and they went to college together or whatever it was. And he's like, oh, yeah, so Aston Martin, God, it's terrible now, yada, yada, yada. It gets out and people start to hear of these things. So, but to Lawrence Stroll's point of view, he wants to get a quick, he's got to get a return on his investment. So it's a difficult situation.
I was going to say, what would you say would be his best move now, concerning the 2022 car? I mean, would he be better off? I mean, I know that you and I probably agree he'd be better off to just let his designers come up with what they come up with and trust them.
I will be perfectly honest with you. I worry about Aston Martin going into 2022.
True.
You don't know what effect this change of philosophy, for want of a better word, has had on the organisation, the morale there. Yes, there's a lot of money flowing around there. All of a sudden, they're building a new facility, a new factory there. It's going to be probably the best in the business. There is undoubtedly engineering talent there, but Formula One is not a 9-to-5 job. It's not one of those careers that you do what is required. You do and push yourself to the limit. I mean, I work 50, 60, sometimes longer hours a week, in Formula One especially, and not even batted an eyelid. It's because it's what you do. It's not because it's expected of you or because somebody will shout at you if you don't. It's just what you do because you are passionate about what you do. And that comes from the mindset of the people around you. And the fact that everybody else in that ecosystem and that bubble that you're living in does exactly the same thing. So nobody questions it. Nobody goes, geez, I've worked hard this week, because it's what you do. So any chink in that armor of motivation and dedication can have huge ramifications on the rest of the organization and the morale of the engineers. And if that morale is low, and if the work environment isn't as positive as it normally would be, then there is a real danger that they will underperform next year, because you need, especially when you're going through a huge philosophy change like we will be going into 2022, you need that commitment, that I hate the phrase, but that 110% commitment. You need that. And if it's not there, even if you're at 99%, that every other team is at 100, you're going to plummet like a stone down that pecking order rapidly.
Yeah, so the ball's in Mr. Stroll's court, that's for sure. So,
we'll
just have to see that. Louise, you have any thoughts on Racing Point, Aston Martin?
They've just been underwhelming. Sure, Stroll and Vettel have been decent in qualifying, but they've just been extremely underwhelming. And I kind of had that feeling it was going to happen. We talked about it last week. It seems like this week is a continuing trend to where they got to do something on their own terms rather than rely on something that somebody else has already done. That's why Reynolds snitched on them, and it seems like it's just a convoluted mess, and we'll see how it goes. But they're not running like they were at all. It doesn't honestly surprise me.
I could see something really going wrong there really fast. I think Lawrence. Now, goodness me, we're 2 years into this project of Lawrence Stroll owning the team. I can see something going really wrong really fast there. Or 3 years into him owning it, I think, aren't we? Yeah, not sure.
Yeah,
but yeah,
18.
It could, something bad could go. He can go, right, screw you, I'm off, bye, and drop it like a stone.
Right, take all his money with him. Yep.
Yeah. And he's also got the Aston Martin brand as well here. So, I'm, as Louis said, something doesn't add up. And I pray it doesn't happen, because you know what? I don't care about Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel's performance on the track, whatever. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to come last. That happens. What I care about is the 500, 600, 700 people or whatever it is that are employed by this team. And you hope that commitment's there is there long term, and they he takes a back seat and lets guys like Otmar, Schaffenhauser, I think I can never pronounce his surname. Jeez, Otmar's a great guy. I used to work with him at Honda back in the day, and we used to get on really well. He's a great guy, and he needs to be given the opportunity to run that team. He is a team principal. He needs to have that role, not Lawrence Stroll. I'm sorry, that's he's the money guy, and you got to be accountable, and people you got to make sure that your money's going in the right place. But if you buy a team and you entrust somebody like Otmar to run the place, let them do their job properly.
I agree fully.
They're not the only ones either. Look at Haas and that whole fiasco, whether or not Gene is going to leave or what have you.
Well, I think that was slightly different. It's just that Gene just doesn't have the money, really. It's a different. They've obviously been stung by the whole rich energy thing and some of the other things that have gone on in the last couple of years, and they're going about it in a very different way with Dallara designing the car, and they basically just run the car. It's a different model, and maybe it's not quite what they wanted. And as much as I have a huge amount of respect for Gene Haas and what he's achieved in motorsport, it never struck me that he was there for the long term. And the whole, I hate to say this, and I don't want to be, the whole thing about it being billed as an American Formula One team, it's not. It never has been, and there never will be an American Formula One team. There will be a Formula One team run under the American banner, but they're not, in the actual team that builds the cars and runs the cars and turns the wheels every other weekend or whatever it was. Their employment rate of Americans, for want of a better word, is probably less than 10%, maybe even less than 5%. I don't know, but obviously on the marketing and manufacturing side, which is based in North Carolina still, there's a lot more. But of the actual guys on, the people that design the cars and run the cars, 10% would be my estimation. I may be wrong, but again, it was never going to work. It's never going to fit that image that they were trying to create. And if there's no US-based company that can come along and sponsor them with the amount of money that's floating around in the US, obviously there's something not right there. And the fact that they have to go
the last guy to
cap in hand to the Russians to get money, and with the political implications of that, tells you everything you need to know about the long-term feasibility of that project.
Right. And wasn't the last American Formula team also Haas, but Carl Haas?
Yeah.
And he had the backing from Beatrice and Lola building the car, and that
they jumped in late in the season. They didn't jump in straight out of gate.
That I think Alan Jones was the driver. Well, it wasn't a bad little cost, but it didn't last long again.
No, and it's never going to.
No, it's never going to, because there's too much American racing that you can involve yourself in.
Exactly.
And Gene Haas is just bleeding money.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just, and if he'd have found a big backer to keep him in the game, he might stay in the game. But he is putting so much of his own fortune into this team for really zero, return. And I feel bad for the guy. And if he sells out to the Russians, I don't blame him.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, we've got this following weekend off, but then we're on to Monaco.
Yeah, that's correct.
Indeed, the Principality.
Yes, Indeed, Monaco, which we didn't get to see Monaco last year. That was one of the races that didn't make the cut. So,
but we have already had a little teaser of Monaco with the Formula E race.
With the Formula E race, yep. So
ran on the full circuit, and you know what? It was a pretty damn entertaining race with some good overtaking and good moves.
It was, yeah. I always enjoy watching Formula E for whatever reason, other than the fact that it's so quiet to watch. But those guys always. It always seems like a really, good battle. It's always a good battle. There's always good battles through the field and at the front. So, I wish more folks watched Formula E. I
just wish they'd get rid of that stupid fan boost thing. I know that's designed to increase fan interaction and everything, but that is a little goofy. Yeah, that's
That's like a NASCAR All-Star race, and fans
or Super Mario Kart.
Vote.
Yeah, watching The Voice or something, you know.
Yeah. Bleep, 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 bleep. Yeah. So, all right. So I guess we can hold off on picking a Monaco winner until next week since we got a week off in between. IndyCar is headed for the IndyCar Grand Prix. Getting ready for the month of May. The track's set to open for the month of May. It looks like as of now we have 35 entries for the Indy 500. We did have 36, but I heard that the Cody Ware
experience
has been
got canceled.
Has been scratched. Yep.
To
use a horse racing term, yeah.
500 now. That's me done. Sorry, guys.
Okay, yeah. But I don't know if you saw. But speaking of, we'll just spend a few minutes on Indy here before we start talking about Darlington. But I saw an interesting thing earlier this morning. They unveiled the livery for Rinus VK's 500 car, and his sponsor is Bitcoin.
Well, it was until the market just crashed about an hour ago.
Well, anyway, but that's I just always think it's new when you see something new coming into racing, because these cryptocurrencies or whatnot, I don't understand them very well, but I know that some folks do, and they've a lot of folks that are interested in these type of things. But any new sponsor coming into the sport is welcome. It wasn't that long ago we started welcoming vapor products in. We still have Views out there.
Yeah, there was some at St. Petersburg at those billboards, so I guess we're allowed to promote vaping advertisements for now.
Well, for now, yeah. It's perfectly legal. Because they had Views. Remember, they had Mystic, and Blue were all vapor products. Were all sponsored Indy cars. Mind you, tobacco products are no more. They haven't been for years. But anything that's just kind of new and different getting in, and this Bitcoin is just an interesting one. It's just because it's really kind of way out there, because it used to be, if you think your traditional motor racing sponsors began with oil companies, tire brands, those sort of things, automotive accessories, and then they morphed into alcoholic beverages, cigarettes, those sort of things. And then as a sport group, we started to see more, grocery store products, consumer goods, candies, delivery services. So now Bitcoin is coming in as a cryptocurrency, sponsoring an Indy 500 car. That's pretty neat. So that's it.
Yeah. It's an interesting sponsorship, that's for sure. And as far as that 52 team, I'd imagine it's money, because they couldn't find spot, because sponsorship became a problem. And there's so much that Rick Ware could do to put his son in a ride virtually for free that you couldn't even get Spencer Pigot. You're going to get anybody in that car that probably would have been more qualified, much less have sponsorships. Whereas Stephen Wilson does have the sponsorship, and he's back with the 25 team.
Yep, Stephen Wilson will be in an Andretti car for the month of May. Well, for the 500, I don't believe he's doing the Grand Prix. But
no, it's just Kimball and Montoya that is the extra entries for the Grand Prix.
And speaking of Montoya, we're talking about him the other day because McLaren has evidently a big announcement coming up on Sunday, and we don't know what it is. Some folks say it's a sponsorship announcement. Some say it's just a company announcement, but there's a little speculation. Richard and Louise and I were talking the other day and said, wouldn't it be neat if they were putting together a Le Mans team? And, they go ahead and do the LMH, Le Mans hypercar, put him in the top class, put Montoya in that car. Wouldn't that be neat if he gets that Triple Crown and Alonso says, man?
It could happen. And
happen.
If it's Le Mans, it could be. I'd imagine it'd be perfect to put a super team. That's why I suggested like Lando Norris or Daniel Ricciardo to give it a go. Depends on Formula One if they purposely put a Grand Prix in that weekend.
I think they tried to keep it open, didn't they?
I think they tried to, yeah. But
like the year that Hulkenberg won it, the very next year they purposely put a Grand Prix in there. I imagine by design or whatever, but I remember the following year they literally added a Grand Prix to clash with Le Mans.
Yeah, I've long held the contention ever since Alonso started his Triple Crown quest back in, what was it, 2017, when he first announced he was going to win the Indy 500 in Le Mans. Well, Le Mans was a no-brainer because there's only two cars in the LMP1 class when he when he jumped in with the correct team. There you go. But I've always contended that Montoya is closer than he is, because Montoya's already got that Indy 500 under his belt, and we do know that Montoya is a very skilled and excellent sports car racer and endurance racer. He's won an IMSA title just 2 years ago. So, so that'll be neat to see. But it could just be that this is just a sponsor announcement, and
or Formula E for all we know,
or Formula E, or anything else. But we'll just have to keep your ear to the pavement, see what's going on with McLaren on Sunday. But they say it's a big announcement. All right, so Darlington. So we're not used to seeing a NASCAR race finish with somebody lapping the entire field, but that's pretty close to what we saw this week here. Martin Truex was class of the field all day, stuck up the show at Darlington. And again, so Truex is now 3 wins on the season, really making his mark here. Louise, what did you think about the Darlington race?
With Truex winning, everybody else still has a single win. So Truex is still the only multi-winner this year. It's just what do you consider a typical Martin Truex Jr. kind of race? Just when he's on it, he's on it. You cannot beat him, whether it's on a short track, intermediate, or super speedway. Well, not super speedway yet, but the speedway tracks, because he's still yet to finally capitalize on those plate tracks, or now known as super speedways with Daytona Talladega. But Kyle Larson tried to make a show out of it in the closing lap. He caught him, but I think he just wore out his tires too much. It did it a little bit too early. Well, and if you're in a position for the win, you try to go for it, but sometimes patience would be nice, but you cannot, especially how strong Truex is. It's just, nobody could catch him, nobody other than Kyle. And when Kyle did, he wore out his car too much, and it was too little, too late. There's been other guys like Harvick, Keselowski that started off great. They fell apart, and strategy was vital. That kicked a lot of people in the curb. Keselowski had a terrible race. Ross Chastain's strategy backfired. Kyle Busch, who was leading, spun with a flat tire, thought that was over. He ain't going to win or be a factor with a good result, and he got a third. So there was a lot of factors into it. And a lot of people say, it was a boring race. There was nothing interesting. But from my vantage point, there were a lot of track decisions, a lot of close battles. Sometimes you're going to have those races where it's just somebody's going to outclass everybody. And that's what we saw this Sunday with Truex. And like most of his other wins, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, like I said, we've seen a lot of that out of Truex the last couple of years. And Truex is an interesting character because here's a guy whose career seemingly took forever to get going. If you recall, Martin Truex's rookie season was 2004. And he's just been around. He was, he won a race in 2007, and I don't think he won another one for another 10 years.
He would,
16, wasn't it? Was it 16 Pocono?
Oh, no. Cup debut 04, rookie season 06, first win 07. He wouldn't win again until Sonoma 2013. That was the first race I ever went to. It's Sonoma 2013.
Right, but at the same time, he is, I believe, right at 40 years old right now, and he's driving better than probably anybody else out there. Honestly, if you just look at his racecraft and the way he puts a race together, and then when he gets out front, stays out front and manages the car, and manages the tires, manages the pit stops.
Well, he's the only guy with multiple wins this year, isn't he? And
exactly, and this has been a very competitive year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of unbelievable that he probably, he likely, a lot of guys wouldn't have held on to a job that long.
No.
Without a win, especially in today's culture, it's win or get out. There was a time where you could be a Kenny Schrader and run around in the middle of the pack and get a paycheck. But now
it's interesting that that they're sort of starting to, they had that little transition period post Cole Pern there, didn't they, last year? But they've started to set up, with a new crew chief and a new setup there, and that's all starting to work really well for them.
Yeah. Got to mesh well to click enough, and it's good to see that Truex are able to do it, because remember last year he only had that weeknight win in Martinsville. We thought it was that's probably the downturn of Truex's career, and we may say in a few years they were going to write him off, but now that's not the case right now. It seems to just clicking quite well in the 19 team. It shows you why he's still with Gibbs, and he's viewed as a valuable asset.
Yeah, he's really found his stride, at 40 years old. Well, I mean, so we'll say, starting in about 2016, 17, he really found his stride and became, from a decent driver to, one of the top guys. So, and he remains there. So.
Yeah, and a lot of people also bring this up now recently, that he's probably one of the most cleanest drivers out there, that he'll give you an opportunity. Sure, he'll be vocal how they race him, like with Logano or Ricky Stenhouse in the past, or even, if I remember, Denny Hamlin this year earlier. It feels like yesterday thinking about that whole ordeal with Truex and Hamlin, but that is true, and who knows? I was banking that Larson was going to catch him, but it's just Darlington. It's what it is. If you go a little bit too much or push it too much, it's going to bite you, because tires are everything at Darlington. His pit strategy is crucial as well. There was a lot of good drivers that struggled quite horrendously, or even had flat tires, like Michael McDowell and Alex Bowman had issues that knocked them out of a good finish.
Yeah, I mean, Darlington's always a bit of a tough track. What do they say? It's too tough to tame, right?
Yeah, and so did Eric Jones. Yeah, Eric Jones came into this race top 10 every time in Cup. First year in the 43, struggle. He just did not have the pace. Even if he could be good, sometimes the car may not be there, or it's just not meant to be at all. And a lot of drivers, just their days were not meant to be. The fact that we saw like barely a dozen cars on the lead lap, it just shows you that Darlington still has that personality trait, no matter the horsepower, no matter package, no matter who dominates.
Yeah, but I mean, interestingly enough, though, remember, if you recall, early in the season, we were talking about how Toyota hadn't gotten a win yet, early on, and how the Chevys and the Fords look to be a little bit ahead of the Toyota, but now that's kind of rolling back to Toyota now. Well, especially with Truex, but Kyle Busch picked up a win as well last week, so it looks like we've got a little more parity going on here. But I still got to say that down the stretch, Kyle Larson is really looking like he's going to be the guy to beat week in and week out,
especially at the mile and a halves. But speaking of Darlington's not a mile and a half, excuse me, but those kind of tracks larger than a mile, he's going to be a threat, and he showed it again. But the big question is, can he win again? Because remember my bold prediction, I said he'll win a race, but he'll be knocked out early. One or the other is going to happen. I still stand by it. But he's doing quite well so far, and what more can you want from him? He's shown that he's with a good, solid, established car and a good established team like Hendrick in a time period where Hendrick are finally getting their winning ways back and be competitive week in and week out. This is encouraging. Maybe someday, eventually, sponsors may want to come back to Larson or be on board with it for the first time. He just needs to win a couple more races to get that ball rolling. And the same goes to Denny Hamlin, albeit Hamlin has FedEx, but Hamlin, strong work they gave you that so far in NASCAR, but you need to win, period. I don't care if like Matt Crafton went winless in Truck Series 1 champion. I don't care if Ryan Newman nearly won a title for probably being winless, where he had to beat Harvick for him to win a championship, though, so he would have won anyway. You just got to have to click when it matters most. You can have all these great runs right now, but when it comes to the postseason, it's going to be crucial to win.
Yeah. There's a couple guys out there other than Denny Hamlin still looking for their first win of the season. Notably, Chase Elliott hasn't won this year yet, has he?
Yep, and neither has Harvick.
Yeah, Hamlin, Harvick, Elliott are probably the three.
Yeah, those are the three big hitters there. Yeah, I mean, because all the Penske guys have won. Blaney did win a race, didn't he?
Yeah, he won at Atlanta.
That's correct. Yeah. So the ball's in their court. So yeah. So where are we off to next?
We are going to Dover, the Monster Mile, this weekend.
Well, see, that should bode well for Harvick, right? He's won a couple there.
So has Truex, so it could go either
way.
way.
Has Truex, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, Dover's not one of my favorite tracks. Never has been. But at the same time, I don't mind it. I love the rock sculpture of the monster with the car in his hand is about my favorite thing about Dover. I just remember back in the 90s, back when Dover was a 500, that thing could easily go 6 hours. With the
if a big wreck or a hard lick from a driver happens, you're destined to be there for over 5.5 hours. That's probably why ESPN dropped it and gave it to TNN, because it's just that long of a race. And ultimately they cut it down to 400 because I'd imagine those were endurance races, especially how long, you never know how long that race could go.
Yeah, there were some long ones in the 90s. I remember that. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the prevalent factors where they started saying, then, does every race need to be 500 miles? Or 500 laps. So
Dover and Rockingham were cut to 5 to 4.
Right, and so was Pocono, and a couple others were.
Fontana was dropped to 400.
Up to 400, yeah.
And the same time with Pocono.
Yeah, but if you think about that, even today, this day and age, with young people's shorter attention spans and just the competition for television time, right? It's more palatable thing to sell to television that we have this will fit in a 3.5 hour block rather than just could go 5 hours or more, So
yeah, you got a lot to be playing with, and you cannot mess around with it now. Back then you could, but not now.
Right. Now, Richard, you've worked on setting up these cars. Now, Dover is a bit interesting and different than a lot of the tracks. I mean, number one, it's full on concrete, just like Bristol, but it's a bit bigger than Bristol. It's a bit flatter than Bristol.
Yep.
I mean, what do you see as the particular challenges of setting up a car for Dover and getting that performance all day long?
It's a little bit more of a driver's track, I'd say. The driver's a little bit more in tune with it in terms of brake. Sounds very simplistic, but in a way it is. You've got the flatter curve, flatter banking on the curves, so you don't have that natural turning that you can see on a lot of these tracks. So, the braking is more in demand. Okay, you're not doing the high top speeds going into the corners, but it does put a demand on the cars that you don't see at a lot of the other tracks, and it's that sort of perfect combination of flat, turns and a little bit longer straights. It's a unique circuit in many ways, and you do have the grip issues, as I say, being a concrete circuit, which is again pretty unique. So it's one of these tracks that really a lot of these guys will just go to their setups from previous years and just run with it. You're not going to spend hours and hours and hours running simulations on this because it's such a unique track and it is so driver dependent. You give a driver a car that can get the job done and have at it, boys. Just go and do your thing. And we'll look to the next race from a setup standpoint, really. Horrible to say, but it does, it's not unusual for that to be the mentality of a place like Dover.
Well, nothing wrong with a driver's track. I mean, I'm a big fan of a driver's track. And
again, you look at, we talk about, this is a track that suits guys like Harvick and Truex, two of the best guys out there. So, that says it all, really, doesn't it?
Yep. So, Louise, did we have an Xfinity race at Darlington this past week? We did, right?
Yes, we did. We had trucks and Xfinity. The truck race was just a literal mess. Once the big wreck happened, it hurt the shot of John Hunter Nemechek. Corey Heim, an ARCA standout, made his debut. He was having a tremendous showing, but that got ruined by that big wreck in the end. Sheldon Creed won the truck race. following the race-ending caution that involved Haley Deegan, who's just been having an appalling season, an appalling rookie year. The same goes with Derek Cross, super appalling. So it's been a rough year for a couple of the former West standouts. And Xfinity, Noah Gragson won the Dash for Cash, but got disqualified ultimately today as we're recording this. He won the appeal, so he gets his Dash for Cash money back. And Josh Berry also had a great run. He finished second, but in the end, it was Justin Allgaier who won in the Dale Earnhardt 2000 Daytona 500 Inspired Paint Scheme. Big win for him, for Allgaier. So everything is going quite right now with JRM as a whole.
Yeah, there's some speculation that JRM may move up to Cup, but I don't hear anybody at JRM saying that. Just idle talk from other folks.
That's been the discussion for years, but it seems like the talks are increasingly leaning towards maybe getting a Cup.
Leaning towards maybe. I like that. Maybe.
If we had Seth here, he'll probably explain much better than I do some of the complicated issues as far as junior running. JRM going to Cup is like finding a charter or how many cars will show up, especially coming to 2022 with the new car. It's kind of become a now or never ordeal for Dale if he wanted to start a Cup team. And if he comes in,
do you feel like he wants to start a Cup team? In my mind, as I look at Dale Earnhardt Jr. and listen to him and watch his podcast and listen to him, on the broadcast and watch him with his race team, he seems like a guy that's perfectly happy and content with what he has right now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I get the same by. Yeah, and it's okay. You do need a couple teams that are just exclusive to one lower series. Look at the trucks. You have Thorspor. In Xfinity, you have JRM. Colleague is not going to become both an Xfinity and a Cup team, but the fact that we still have a couple of teams, whether it's trucks or Xfinity, that are exclusive to that one series, is not a bad thing to have. I think it's a neat way to build stability and say, okay, if you want to see Dale Jr., the future stars, the Dale Jr. saw some value in talent for like a Josh Berry or a Sam Mayer coming up, you go watch the Xfinity series. And it's okay. You do need some stability. You need a couple guys that will run that are meant just to be an Xfinity or truck driver, or some run a few years in Xfinity before moving to Cup rather than rush them, whether they have the talent or preparations.
I can't agree with you more, Louise. Yeah, I mean, even in the early days of the truck series, you had guys that were just specialists like Ron Hornaday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it did. Yeah, with Hornaday, like you built stars in the earlier trucks with Sprague, Hornaday, Skinner. They moved up to Cup, but of the three that I mentioned, only Skinner had the longevity. Sprague kicked to the curb in 2003. Didn't even finish the season. Ron Hornaday ran 01 before deciding to go to the Busch Series. He did okay before going back to the Truck Series, where he was able to rack up records. And it's not the bad thing to have as well, because look at how many drivers in the mid-2000s were there. One made the Truck Series so strong at that time period. You had a couple of those ex-Cup drivers that either were okay or just flat out had a bad rookie year that they couldn't make it back. And it's been also good races. You just need that stability of drivers. And I know Kelly Cradle was animate about it in one podcast that you just need an influx of drivers like in Xfinity, Ryan Sieg or Jeremy Clements. You need those kind of guys. But at the same time, back then, those established long mainstay guys were actually contenders for wins, like a Tommy Houston. We don't really have that right now with Xfinity besides Justin Allgaier.
Exactly. So, well, with that being said, we've just got a few minutes left in the show. So I would like to go around the board and let's make some picks. We need to pick a winner for the Indianapolis Grand Prix for the Indy cars, and we need to pick a winner for Dover. So, Richard, I'll start with you. Who do you like for the Indianapolis Grand Prix?
Herta.
Hey, good choice there. And for Dover?
Bowman.
Okay, nice. And Louise, Indianapolis Grand Prix?
I think Graham Rahal is going to pull it off this time around. Strategy bit him a year ago. He has the momentum that he needs. I think this is going to be a good start to the month of May for Graham Rahal. That's my pick for the Grand Prix. And it's gone.
And Dover?
Okay, I was going to wait because I thought you were going to say something. But Dover, I'm going to go with Chase Elliott. I think he finally breaks through in his title defense with a win at Dover.
Okay, and I want to go a little bit outside the box for the Indianapolis Grand Prix and pick a guy who's done well here and done well in some similar circuits, but hasn't gotten a first win yet, and that is Jack Harvey.
That's a probability.
Yep.
I want a chip on his shoulders too.
Feel like he's got something to prove. Yep. Him and Graham Rahal had a little bit of a war of words after this last race, and he feels like Graham maybe disrespected him a little bit. And it goes back to you remember when Takuma Sato felt he was disrespected after Pocono.
Years ago, yeah.
When everybody accused him of starting that wreck at the start, even though if you watch the in-car from his car, he never changed his line, and he came right back the next week and won that race. That's the kind of fire I'm feeling from Jack Harvey. And as far as Dover, I'm going to say Harvick goes ahead and picks up his first win of the year because, I mean, it's almost inconceivable to think that a guy like Kevin Harvick is going to go winless, So,
you could have Harvick. Harvick goes to season winless, and then wins the championship to make up for last year, where he won everything in sight. Apart from
Hey,
if that happens,
it could happen. It could happen. Yeah.
If that happens, then Richard gets 50 from me.
Hey,
there you go.
You heard it here first.
$50. All right. Well, guys, we are out of time, so I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. And want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. And want to thank Louise and Richard. Appreciate you guys a ton. But most of all, I want to thank you folks who listen to us every week. Until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com. Enter website.